When it comes to iconic Japanese figures, there's nothing more iconic than a geisha. Geisha, a word introduced to the world by the 2005 Hollywood film Memoirs of a Geisha. Geisha are highly skilled and trained entertainers who engage in the art of conversation, playing games.
There, you touch it with a hand open. If it's removed, you clench your fist.
Dancing and playing musical instruments by attending social events and dinners. But there is a widespread misconception that geisha are high-end sex workers. However, this is not true. Minako Iwasaki, birth name Masako Tanaka, was the most famous geisha in Japan. And the famous novel and movie Memoirs of a Geisha was written taking her background information by the American author Arthur Golden. However, Minako later regretted giving this interview to Golden, having cited breach of confidentiality, and later sued and settled out of court with Golden for the parallelism between his book and her life. Hi, it's your host Rupa Barwa, and you're watching the new show. Today, let's understand the role of a geisha in ancient Japan and how it has evolved over the centuries. The roots of geisha are written in kanji, where the word ge means art and sha for doer. And when you combine these two words, means performance artist. The term geisha is originally a genderless word. As hard as it is to believe, the very first geisha were men. Before the female geisha developed as what we know today, Japan's first group of entertainers were male Taikomochi. These men were known to advise and entertain their lord, and by the 16th century they became more akin to storytellers who were focusing on curating conversation and inciting humor. By the 17th century, their role had changed. They were no longer needed to entertain their lords, and this led to their move to the pleasure districts where they started performing for the general public. The term geisha started being applied to Taikomochi during this time. By the mid-18th century, the female geisha started performing in these pleasure districts, and that is when the term geiko came into use. Geiko swiftly overtook their male counterparts in popularity, and by the early 19th century, the vast majority of geisha were now women. Surprisingly and sadly, Taikomochi were forced to evolve again. With the dominance of female geisha rising, this led to a fall of Taikomochi in Japan. Today, it is believed that there is only a handful of left who are still performing in Japan. Over time, geisha became more than just dancers and learned to play traditional instruments, drinking games, and studied the art of conversation. Soon afterwards, geisha became a widespread phenomenon in the country, and the wealthy Japanese men wanted to be seen with geisha because of their beauty and elegance as well as the respect they attracted. How does one become a geisha? Well, training for a geisha is absolutely long and extensive, something that one may even compare it to completing a medical school. So let's break this down and understand the most important steps to becoming a geisha. First step is to enter an okiya. Okiya are female-only lodging houses which is run by a proprietress known as Okasan, which means mother. For most, the journey starts as young as 14 or 15. A newly accepted trainee first goes through a training period where she is known as a shikomi-san. During this time, she will attend her classes, do chores to help maintain the okiya, and also serve as an assistant to other geisha. Typically, this period lasts for about 4 years. Trainees must also begin attending vocational schools. This includes a variety of musical instruments such as kotsu-sumi, which is a small drum held on the shoulder and played with hand, shimedaiku, which is a small standing drum played with sticks, shamisen, and fu, which is a flute made from a single piece of bamboo. Other than these classes, the trainees also spend their time learning the demeanor of a geisha and how they speak with their elders and guests. After the Shikomi-san stage, the trainee enters the Minarai stage. During this time, the trainee is known as Minarai, which means learning by watching. Here they have to find a mentor where they call them Onni-san, which means older sister. The trainee have to follow the mentor around to attend events and observe them how they interact with guests. This gives trainees a real-world experience of how the geisha world works and also to know and understand their potential clients. After completing the Shikomi period and being a Mina Rai, the young geisha in training is finally ready to make her official debut. And this ceremony is known as Nisedashi. On the day of the ceremony, the Okya walls are beautifully decorated with red and white wallpapers and auspicious images. Accompanied by her mentor, the trainee will go around the Hanamachi district and visit various dance teachers and tea houses. During this ceremony, the trainee will go through a ritual known as Sansan Kuro, which means 3 times 3 exchanges of cups, which is also done in the traditional Japanese wedding ceremonies. Here, the trainee will exchange cups with her mentor, other geiko, and senior maiko. After this ceremony, the trainee officially becomes a maiko, which literally means dance girl. Even after her official debut, the maiko continues to train for becoming a full-fledged geisha. There was a growing misconception of geisha as prostitutes and if geisha were a part of the sex industry. Well, in the aftermath of the World War II, the number of geisha quickly declined as geisha houses closed and many people could not afford to pay for their entertainment. Even after the war had ended, many places reopened and found themselves facing even tougher regulation in a completely different post-war Japan. During post-war occupation of Japan, a large number of US soldiers stationed in Japan had their first ever interaction with Japanese culture, which led to a variety of misunderstandings. Part of the growing reason for this confusion was that during the post-war years, some women in the sex industry would dress up and claim to be geisha, simply to entice Western men, despite having undergone none of the rigorous training that a true geisha must complete. And this led to a great deal of confusion throughout the West about the true role of geisha in Japanese society. As a result, the word geisha became synonymous with prostitution in Japan, while the truth was very far from it. However, many Japanese strongly insist that geishas were not at all prostitutes but skilled performers. Before World War II, it was a common practice for poor Japanese families to send their children away to small businesses to work. Women who were geishas had no other choice but to be geishas. They were either born into trade or forced to join it to survive. Many were the girls who were sold by their parents to geisha houses. Their parents would be paid a regular sum of money for several years. They worked as house servants or maids until they were old enough to begin their geisha training. The geisha houses looked upon the girls as investments and kept them from leaving by obligating them to pay off their debts for their maintenance and training. Furthermore, she is also contractually tied to it until she has repaid all her debts. However, this was outlawed in post-war Japan, and geishas have since been free to enter and leave the profession as per their choice. Though one part of geisha culture that is frequently brought up to tie them to the sex industry is the idea of Mizuage, a ritual described and overly emphasized in Golden's book Memoirs of a Geisha. Mizuage refers to a ritual where a young female loses her virginity, usually to a bidding suitor, and in this case will soon become a full-fledged geisha. First of all, it is important to understand that this ritual was not practiced by all geisha communities and was indeed discouraged by many. In places where it was allowed, the focus of Mizuage was not selling the service, but rather the rite of passage, something women of this era strongly felt was perfectly normal of an adolescent female's transition to womanhood. But of course, this ritual and all forms of prostitution were made illegal. To put it in simplest terms, no, geisha are not part of the sex industry. While there is no expectation of working geisha to remain chaste, while it is true that there is documented evidence of geisha both voluntarily and involuntarily participating in the sex industry, but that should not obscure the fact that all true geisha undergo intense training in variety of classical arts as well as hospitality to become masters of their trade. Geisha have relied historically on these skills that they have sharpened over years and years of experience. rather than on their sexuality to establish their role in Japanese society. Many geisha expressed frustration with women pretending to be geisha just to attract customers in the post-war Japan. By 1945, when women returned to being geisha after war, they wanted to restore their name and culture to traditional roots and even work for better rights for geishas. Geisha were considered to be forward thinkers and front runners when it comes to feminism in Japan, as they promote a women-only business model that allows women to be self-sufficient and have economic independence. Geishas were the original working women. They have always been in control of their own lives. They were very modern, far more modern than Japanese wives who had restricted lives. But today there is only a handful of young women training tirelessly to keep the traditional life. In the 1920s there were around 80,000 geisha in Japan, whereas today there is about 2,000 as per 2021 article of Asia Highlights. You can find geisha in the famous capital of geisha culture, Kyoto, and within and nearby Tokyo. Want to become and experience the life of a geisha? There is a Studio Geisha cafe run by a former actress model Mishiro with her husband in the Tokyo suburbs of Morishita. Her goal is to let people live out their dreams. And here you can experience becoming a geisha and also get a feel of traditional Japan. So that's all for this video. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. If you like this video, give a thumbs up, subscribe, share, and thanks for watching the movie show.